Hello guys, I'm Quizzer and I'm going to do a quick as I can tutorial on what I'm doing to make 3D scans with Photogrammetry for Tabletop Simulator. So we're going to be doing this Fire Slayer chap here today. There's going to be a couple of bits of software you will need to make this work, namely being 3ds Zephyr. You can also use Metashape, and there is some other options out there, but Zephyr is the one we're using and the one I find to be generally the best, with some drawbacks. You'll also be needing Blender or another 3D mesh editing software, and you'll also be needing ImBatch, which is what we're using to process the images in advance, ready for the photogrammetry. There's one other thing, sorry, that you need to help with the process, and that is either tab save if you have Chrome, or if you have Firefox, use Simple Mass Downloader. Just means that we can get images a bit easier off the website with that. So there's two types of images you can get off the website. There is this one, which is 48 images horizontally, which gives us a nice smooth transition, but there's no overhead shots. And then there's the 4x12, which is 12 shots horizontally, a bit more jagged, but you have got the benefit of shots from above. These ones are typically a bit trickier to get done, but we're not going to be doing it today, so it doesn't matter. Right, this guy, what you need to do is right click on the 360 image, view the image, and copy everything before the file name in the address bar. Then open Google Sheets, and I will be providing a link to this, or you can make your own. Basically all it's going to do, this one down here, is make us a bunch of links. I've already copied it in here from the last time we did this, so it's fine. This top one here is for 4x12. You can see you've got 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, and down to 2 and 3, like that, and these are just a straight list from 1 to 48, and these are the links we actually need on the right hand side. So if I copy those, open up my mass downloader, so I'm using Simple Mass Downloader as I have Firefox. Just going to clear that list, click on the 3 lines, import your RS clipboard, and there's all the images there. Hit go. Right, let me go up to my downloads folder. There they are, get them all highlighted. I've made a folder in advance for this, always good to be organised, and I'm just going to drag those in there. You can hold down shift to move them if you don't want to copy them, which I do. Next thing you want to do is open up ImBatch, and wrong folder, there we go. Drag this into the left side box here. Now there's a couple of filters you want to apply in this stage, and basically what we're doing is improving the quality of the image so that photogrammetry is more accurate, because the default Games Workshop pictures are crap. So first thing we do is going to increase the size by 500%. So you want to change this box over here on the right. You can add new tasks by hitting this button here. You want to set it to bicubic filtering. The rest of it doesn't matter too much. Or you want 300 dpi as well. And then we go to sharpen. I have this set to only 3. We don't want it to be too high, because if you change the image too much, or Zephyr, or whatever photogrammetry software you're using, will get confused because the images don't match up with each other. So 3 is usually quite good. Curves is where we adjust like the contrast levels of the image. I like to have this gentle slope down and then jutting forwards a bit at the bottom here. Basically it boosts up the black level slightly. As you see, that's without it. And if I add it up to there, just brings out some of the shadows a bit, makes it a little bit less washed out. Just move that a little bit more. About there. You never want to go above the white line, because then you're introducing additional brightness, and particularly at the top here. Anything that's like very white already, like you see the tip of the spear, if it's too white, the software is not going to pick up on it, and it will just get chopped off. So you want to make sure that it's just below the red line, just to reduce the risk of that happening. Last but not least, color adjustment. This one's optional. Generally I'd leave it turned off by doing that, but as you can see, I've actually pre-aligned this one by just dialing down the saturation a little bit, because it's looking a little bit too orange on the skin and things compared to the other images we've got. So I've just tweaked that a little bit so it's a little bit more neutral. So once you're ready with that, all you need to do is hit the blue button to go. Luckily, I have already done that because I wanted to save some time. So we're going to skip straight to where all my images are. So here we go, all my 48 images pre-adjusted. That process does tend to take about 10 to 15 minutes. It depends what filters you add on. Resizing definitely massively increases the time. Right, so next we open up 3ds Zephyr. Ignore this, this is a failed attempt at the Magridoff. We want to do workflow, new project. And this is where the wizard will come in. All you want in this bottom bit ticked is mask images. You don't want to check online because there's nothing that will help us with. These two here basically allow you to automatically start the next steps, but I prefer to do it manually because then if you can stop it earlier if it messes up and you don't have to spend hours going over the same process again. So we need to next. Ignore that. When I click the plus button to add images, I'm just going to move that remote because that's rattling a lot, it's annoying me. I've got to find where I put my guy, Doomseeker, go, highlight all 48 of them, drop them in there, or press open, that's what you're supposed to do. Go to next, and you say not found. What we need to do now is mask the images, so we're going to launch Masquerade, and there's many ways of masking your images. Zephyr does this fantastic bit of software that does it automatically for you. You can manually do it, but we're going to be hitting this button down here to mask from color. And we click anywhere in the white bit, and then this is where you define the radius of the masking. A good one to start with is usually about 0.05, 0.06, and then 3 or 4 gauss. To test it, hit apply. As you see, it's automatically applied it. And what we're trying to do is get this red edge close to the inside of this, but without introducing any artifacts. As you can see up here on the spear, as I mentioned, it's too white, so it's gotten confused. So what I'm going to do is just to demonstrate, if I push this down to 1, that basically means that it's letting in nearly everything. So it's fixed that area up there, but it's widened the catch area. Still testing this. Basically, if you make it too wide, sometimes the software will then think that you want this white bit around the edge of the image, and it will make this white haze around everything, which is not nice. So you want to try and sort of boost it up a little bit, but keep enough just to keep the details you need. Gauss basically, it adds like an extra bubble layer around things. So say you've got, this is a really bad example. If I lower this and show you, nope, sorry, raise it even. I'm getting no examples here. Basically, I'm just going to have to explain it. Sometimes in, like, say for here example, you might get a bit that's very white, very shiny bit. You can get a little bit on the end of the nose there actually, where it's not masking it because it's white, and you'll just get a hole. Gauss is just going to sort of fill that in with like a fake bit of extra masking. Basically just play around with it. You want to try and just, yeah, get it so it covers everything, but without deteriorating the quality of the image. I will be doing apply to all, but for the sake of this, I'm just going to demonstrate this way. To fix this section here, you want to bring up the lasso tool, or any of these here, and you can just draw on. Oh god, this is difficult. Like that, and hit the plus key on your numpad, and that will add it into it. You won't have to do it that much, and sometimes it's not even necessary, because once the image spins around, the software will realise that, oh, there is actually something there, and it will add it in. But masking it helps to just helps the software along. It's like giving it a little nudge, saying that's a spear, that's a shiny thing, do the shiny thing. Anyway, so that's basically that. I'm going to do it again. Hit apply to all, click yes, and let it do its thing. This is again a fairly lengthy process. Or not. Why did that go so quickly? Have I done this already? I might have already done this and forgotten about it. Oh, that's fantastic. So, as you can see, it's chopped those bits off again because I've reapplied it automatically. So ideally, I'd have to go into this and add all these areas back in again. But I'm not going to bother because it sometimes works, and this is a tutorial, so detail is not the most important thing at the moment. So yeah, once it's done, you can just close down Masquerade, make sure you save, hit refresh, and there's all your images masked. Next step in the process. Calibration for the camera, you can ignore this because we're using a photo off the website. We haven't got a camera to calibrate to, so it's just going to guess, which is fine. Hit next. This is the first important section. You will probably see this at first. Zephyr's presets are typically pretty good, but there's a few tiny things which I do differently which make things better. You can either go to advanced to do these checkboxes, or you can go to custom and manually change everything. I've played around with a lot of these. Sometimes they make a good difference, sometimes they don't, but generally better off you just using the details, the presets even. So what you want is very high, accurate and full. Incremental seems to work the best. Not notice much of a difference between these two. Bounding box, definitely turn that off because obviously it will chop off bits of your model, which you don't want. And this makes a big difference as well. Typically, I will go for circular if it's the 48 horizontal images because the camera is going literally on one axis around the model. So that will basically tell it that that's what's happening and give you a better result. For the 4x12, I tend to use sequential, but I'm experimenting with approximate grid. I can't tell much difference. It's very hit or miss with 4x12. Like sometimes it just doesn't work. Luckily, we're doing circular today, so it's nice and easy. So next step, next. That's it, just confirms everything, and you hit run. This bit takes forever. I'm not joking. It will take probably at least about half an hour, unless you have a really good computer. I think the longest it's gone on for is over an hour and a quarter or something. But basically, the software is now looking at everything in the images and matching up pixel to pixel to get the 3D image we need. But that's for the moment. I'm just going to stop recording and resume when it's finished. Okay, so now we've got to this screen. Hopefully, you've got a whole bunch of yeses. That means that the software has picked up on all of the images and calibrated successfully. If you've got any no's, it's because it's failed and there is likely reasons either the images aren't good enough quality or the masking wasn't good enough, or it can be a whole bunch of things. Any questions you have to ask after the video, basically. Anyway, so moving on, if we hit finish, get rid of that, get rid of that, you have our model. So you can navigate this by left clicking, that will spin around wherever your mouse click is, and then you can mouse wheel zoom in, and then if you hold down the middle mouse button you can pan around like that. You can also hold down shift, although different software, never mind. But anyway, this is what you should get, a bunch of dots and a rough shape of your model. So the next step is going to be turning that into a deep mesh. So what we're going to do is go to workflow, advanced, so not deep, dense point mesh. So hit that, hit next. Again, this is where you could do advanced, but generally this is fine. You don't have to worry about that. So you can just hit presets, urban, high details, next, and run. So this point is a bit quicker than the previous one. You probably found that the last one took a very long time, like half an hour to an hour. This tends to take only about 5 minutes if you're lucky, and the steps after this are generally about the same. So yeah, I'll get back to you when this is done. And here we are, that's that bit done. Hit finish, and you're left with a dense point mesh. So you can actually see the model taking shape now, and it's actually come out pretty well. I can't see any weird bits coming around there, so it looks pretty good. So there's a couple of steps we do here before we generate the actual textured mesh. So first of all, we're going to go to where is it? Plane. There we go. Quite late. I'm getting a bit tired, but yeah. So I'm going to use this here, lower it just below the rim of the base. what you want to do is just sort of you can gently wiggle it until it's in line with the rim. What I have to do is bring it just above. Oh shit! And just move it back and forth until the blue is balanced across the whole thing, and then lower it again. That should do the job. So now we can hit update. That will select it. It's going to select the top wrong bit, so we need to hit invert to get rid of the bottom bit. Hit delete, and there we go, it's gone. You can also use the hand tool, and then you've got rectangles, polys and stuff and lasso, so you can delete little extra bits that you don't need. That bit probably would be fine, just as an example. You can press spacebar to pause, so you can move. Generally this has come out very nicely, so there's not much I need to do really. Yeah, that's good. Oh. So next thing we need to do, close the editing bit because you don't need that anymore, and we need to render the mesh. Let me just check. Yeah, that should be good. So back to workflow again. Advanced mesh extraction. Basically, in the first step of this wizard, when it was asking you if you wanted to basically do these bits for you in one go, doing it one by one means you can delete the bottom part and clean it up before you generate the mesh, so it just saves some time overall. So there we go, mesh extraction. Make sure you've got your dense point cloud 1 selected. You can actually generate more of these. If you're not happy with it, you can generate it again, try changing the settings, but we're not going to be doing that today, so do that. So again, you probably have the presets. Urban is pretty much the best for all of these. Originally I tried close range, but it wasn't as good as urban. Urban is kind of the go-to for me without using the presets. But for advanced, what I'm actually going to do is bump up the image resolution to max and bump up the enhance filter to max. Everything else you can leave as standard. Okay, hit next and hit run again. Again, this is going to take a few minutes, so I will get back to that. And here we are, that's that done. Hit finish, and now we have a mesh. Now this is pretty much a direct representation of what this would look like at super high details. As you see, it's quite nice, but we're going to have to chop this down so that it's small enough for TTS to use. So what I'd like to do at this point is just do a fine look around, just make sure there's anything that needs to be removed. Let's see, there's a tiny little spike there, so I want to get rid of that. So I'm just going to do by hand, lasso, draw a line around it, and just delete that. Spacebar. Oh, yeah, looks pretty good. You can also close that, go to triangles, change the method to connected components, give it a second, hit update, and what you see is it's found 1,202 disconnected triangles, and see there's a few odd specks down here that aren't connected to the main mesh. I always run this. If it's something that's not going to impact the overall quality, I would just get rid of them. Sometimes if you have models where there's lots of thin parts interconnected, it can end up ruining it, so you don't have to do that. But it can help increase the quality once you export it if there's less rubbish triangles to deal with. So final step now is to do a textured mesh generation. So not in advanced anymore, we just do textured mesh. Select all cameras, make sure you've got the right mesh selected, mesh 1. Again, you can rerun it if you want to. Next, and we're on to the texture screen. So this is very important in this section here. What I like to do is, for big models, I make it a 4K texture because there's a lot more there to deal with and look at. For small models, stick with 2K because we can keep the file size down. Image resolution, crank that up to max. This one's very important, max vertices. Tabletop Simulator has a cap on the amount of vertices or faces. We're not entirely sure. If you have it too high, the software it will just fail to load the model. I found to be 7,500 to be the best sort of middle ground to go for that should let it through while still retaining some detail. If you don't do this, it will usually be in the tens, hundreds of thousands, and you have to process it in Blender, and you end up with a worse result. Whereas if you do it at this step, it's building the mesh to that requirement from the start, so it's a lot easier to tidy up afterwards. Make sure it's one texture you want, because you only need one. Sharpening filter depends on what you've got. 10-15% is usually fine. If you go like above 20-30%, it looks a bit too sharp, so I wouldn't go higher than that. You can ignore that. Color balance strength. It will typically recommend limited if there is not a lot of light variance on your model. If there's a lot of light variance, you want to do aggressive. So for video shots, I imagine that would be better. For Games Workshop models, limited is probably better, but default's usually fine anyway. Experimental weighting is basically what it's working towards. Blurriness is probably the better one because the image's quality is not that good. Photo consistency is better if there's moving objects in the scene, or if things and stuff. I'm getting very tired. This is hard to work out what I'm doing anymore. But yeah, so that is what you need to do. Hit next, and we hit run for the final time. So here is our final rendered textured mesh. You see, it's not got quite the same detail as it had before. Oh god, this control scheme is a nightmare. And there's a couple of points here we need to point out. So you'll see on the base, we've got a lot of garbled textures. That's because the camera's all like this when it's spinning around, and it just couldn't quite figure out how to paint this. But generally speaking, the rest of the model is fine. Can't see any glaring issues there at all. So we can fix this up in Blender, so I'll get to that in a moment. So what we need to do is export textured mesh, change it to object/material. Nearest power 2 that's fine. You can tick that as well for single texture, and hit export. And I'm going to save this in Doom Seekers. Doom Seeker. There we go. Hit save. Nice and quick. And bring up Blender. So what you want to do is open up a base model. I will probably include a file of these on Discord or in the links, so you can download your own copies, or you can make your own. But it just helps with the alignment process. And once you're in, hit File, Import, Wavefront Object. Navigate to the folder. That's the wrong one. No, that was the right one actually. I'll get back to there. Fire layers. Doom Seeker. Object. There we go. So it comes in off axis. So we can fix that in a second. If you don't see the texture on it, you've got the menus up here. We can go from wireframe, just the mesh color, and then full lighting and all that. You can also make things transparent, or you can change a wireframe, all sorts of things up there. It's similar control scheme to 3ds Zephyr as well, so push the mouse wheel in, will let you spin around the view like that. So what we're going to do, make sure you're on layout mode, highlight the model, tap number 3 on the numpad. Basically this allows you to change the camera to axes. Number 3 is what we want, and we're going to go to the Move tool, drag it up, press R to rotate, and just line it up roughly. Let's go to 1, do it roughly again, and now 7, center it. Now press S to scale it, bring it up to approximately the right size, make sure it's aligned. Make sure you're in the top-down view and not like that, because otherwise it will move on multiple axes. This will lock it to the X and Y axis. I'm not going to go fully in depth into tidying things up for speed, but that's pretty much it. Let's just make sure there's nicely aligned. Bring it down a bit. Oh, wrong one. Oh, not enough. There we go, pushing wrong buttons. Yeah, that'll do. I'll bring it down a little bit, so it's a bit too wide. That onto there. Right, so what I like to do at this point is tidy up the edge of the circle. Now it's actually come out really nicely, and that's what, when we did that plane cut, it makes the mesh along that point. So I don't really need to do anything here, but say like this little bit here, what we need to do is go to modeling. We can put on the texture mode by hitting that button there, so we can see what we're doing. I'm just going to click on a point where I want to edit it. If you push the del or full stop button next to enter on the numpad, that will focus on that point. Makes it a bit easier to navigate. And you can go back to the move tool, and you can manually move these if you want. There's a whole load of unnecessary vertices there. We'll get rid of those. So if you select multiple points and do Alt M, you can merge points together. You can do it at the center, or you can collapse them, or at the cursor. I'm just going to go with center. So it's just brought them into one point. Let's do that a couple more times. You can also press Shift R to repeat the last command you did. Oh, oh my goodness. Ah. Oh no. There we go. Right. No, not delete. Alt M. Center. Shift R. There we go. But what I like to do, if you go to sculpting, again, let's bring that in, zoom in, and we can use these tools here to basically adjust as if you're like modeling with clay, like that. So if you go down to the bottom right here and go to symmetry, make sure you're in this box here. You can lock the various axes and turn off symmetry. If you have it on symmetry, obviously it's doing it on the opposite side. Don't want that. I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to try locking the Z and X axis. There you go. You see now it's moving across, but it can't go up and down. So what I do, if you hold down Control, it'll do the opposite. If you just click, it does that. So what I do is just tuck it in, essentially. Just kind of get rid of all these little jagged bits. Oh, just to make it look a bit more fitting. Doesn't need to be perfect because you aren't going to be looking that close at it, but it's nice to have. Oh, if you find it's not working, mess with the axis. There we go. That'll do. Tell you what, I'll quickly go over the UV options as well. UV editing up here is how you set the texture. If you don't need to do any edits, this will be automatic. You don't have to worry about it, but we are actually going to make a quick tweak to the base. So if I go to texture view, zoom in here. God, it's a mess. This is going to require some work, so I'll demonstrate how you do it, but I won't do the whole process. So I'm going to highlight all the pixels I want to edit. So I'll just say, for example, I'm doing those there. Generally, the best idea is to do this in chunks. Press U, and then hit unwrap. And you see over here now, we've got the mesh of that area here, and it's tried to basically just transpose that onto here. So what we need to do is, if you hit any point on this mesh that's come up and press L, it will highlight that entire bit, everything that's connected to. You can then press S to scale it, bring it right down. What I do is I find another area that looks like the rocks around the base. So it's a very tricky one actually, because the whole base is a garbled mess. But you can see there's a bit. Oh, there's a bit here. Make sure on the move tool. It's a bit rocky. This is going to be terrible. And what I'll probably end up doing is actually drawing my own rock bits. Like this blurry bit here is not actually useful for the texture, but you could copy this into there. But as you can see, it's made a little bit of a difference. Slightly better. Right, anyway, so back to layout. This is not where I find this work. What do we need to do? So, you know, trim the base. There's no like glary bits anywhere. That's good. What do I need to do? What you can do, if you look at the bottom of the screen here, you might not be able to see it on the YouTube, but on the bottom right, it will tell you how many vertices and faces and tries there are. Obviously, you want to keep it below 7,500, 15k. It can go higher sometimes, but I find this is just a nice, safe middle ground. If you go to this blue spanner here, hit Add Modifier and go to Decimate, we can actually bring down the poly count of this model even further by dragging this box here. Oh, make sure you hit Triangulate as well. You see, it brings down the face count. And you can significantly bring it down. But the more you do it, the crappier it looks. And even a little bit, you'll notice that some textures start looking a little bit jagged. And it just doesn't look right. But because we did it in Zephyr already, we don't need to do that. So it's as good as it needs to be. So if once you've done that, if you did do that, hit Apply and it will add that change. But I'm just going to close it. Right, so now that that's all done, we're going to delete the base. Right click, delete, select the Doom Sphere again, bring her to horizontal view with number 3 or 1, and I'm going to lower it down so it's right on the green line. This is important because when we bring it into TTS, we don't want it hovering above the base, because the green line is essentially the floor of the model. So that's good. So I'm going to, you can save it as a blend file if you want to edit it again in the future, although you can just import the model if you want to. So we're going to go to Fire Slayers, Doom Seeker. I'm just going to copy that because I'm going to write that a few times. Save that. Then go File, Export, Wavefront Object. And this is the one we've basically just churned out from Zephyr. Because it's all been dealt with, we might as well just replace it. Unless you want to have a backup, but we don't really need to. Okay, so that is pretty much everything you need to do in Blender. There are other things you can do to tidy up on this, but I would advise looking at Blender tutorials to get to grips with all those features. There's a lot you can do, but for our purposes, this is fine. So, next point, we need to go into Tabletop Simulator. So I'm going to boot that up right now. Stupidly, I didn't have that running already. Make sure this is recording. Yep, it is good. So just give that a second. Or more than a second. It's worth noting at this point as well, while this is booting up, that if some time has passed since this video came out, there's likely a whole bunch of things that might have changed in this process. So don't hesitate to ask either me or Dark Trinity in Discord. Because there may be a more up-to-date feature or a little tweak that might make things better. But this is pretty much how we're doing things at the moment. So, Table Simulator, the lovely annoying music. I'm just going to jump into a game, doesn't matter what. I'll go into my replay. Right, so I know that this model is a 32-inch base, so I'm going to take one of these bases here I've just carefully presented for myself and just drop it here. What I like to do is turn on the grid. If you hit it on line snapping, that helps with the alignment of the base to the model. You can include the base in the actual model export in Blender, but I prefer to do it this way because it allows you to separate them if you want to change things in the future, and it does make things easier in other ways as well. So we go Objects, Components, Custom, and drag a model onto it. And we're going to find that model we just did. Object. I would upload to cloud if you're going to push it onto the servers, but for just testing, just do local. Set the texture with diffuse image. And this is important, set the collider to the same size base so that models can't interact with the actual model itself. just the base size. Set it to figurine, material, set it to cardboard, and hit import. And there we go. Until we move it now, it's going to snap directly on top of that base. There you go. And what we need to do is use the combine tool, combine the model to the base. And then we can, give it a name. So, Doom Seeker. And because we've done model to the base, and because these are separate, I can now right-click this and change the color tint, and it changes the base color, which is nice. So one more thing I wanted to add to the tutorial that I almost forgot. There are ways of making the texture quality better. Obviously using ImBatch at the start helps things a lot for the scanning, but you might not be happy with the quality at the end of it. So if you've got Photoshop or any other image editing software, you can open up the image file and do some little tweaks on here to improve things. So what I like to do, to zoom in on something noticeable, so a nice picture of the side of his head. A really good feature, if you've got, I think, Photoshop 2018 onwards, if you go filter, camera raw filter, this is a really good bit of kit. I didn't even need to zoom in, because you can tweak pretty much everything about the image, from exposure, all the contrast stuff there. There's sharpening. You can add in film grain, and I made a preset, a couple of presets actually. Neither of which are ideal for this right now, but it basically you can sharpen things up and put a slight grain on it, just to add a bit of texture to it. I think what I've got here for this preset is just a little bit too saturated. I think at the start of the video the model was a little bit too orangey at the time, so what I could do is go to the start here. Where is it? Saturation, I can play around with it there. You can just fiddle around with various settings, or maybe turn down the vibrance and turn the saturation up. Low down the blacks maybe. You could play with this for hours. What I would recommend is fiddle with it, make a preset, try applying it to your other textures and see how it turns out. In fact, that's not too bad. A really good one is the sharpening. Obviously sharpening is good, but luminance in particular is incredible. It smooths over areas very nicely. If I turn it off, see how much garbled nonsense there is here. So you can actually just blend it all together, making it look more like a paint stroke, which I think is what models are supposed to look like. Again, you can mess with the details here. There is so much you can do in this filter. It's great. You hit OK. Bam. Yeah. And again, I think these orangey bits here are way too overblown. But just to give you an example of what you can do, you can also play around with Smart Sharpen, blurring. It's Photoshop. You can do whatever you want in Photoshop. So yeah, that's it. And yeah, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. And yeah, that's all good. Cheers.